Welcome to the Business Unscripted podcast. We're here to share real-life insights, practical strategies, and the honest lessons that we have learned from our own mistakes because, frankly, we have been in your shoes. So whether you need help with operations, accountability, financial knowledge, sales, or maybe just getting your mindset right, we are here, and this is the right spot for no-fluff conversations and tools that work. So grab your favorite cup of joe. Let's jump into the show.
Let's jump into the show, everybody. Welcome, everybody, to another Friday morning. It is a beautiful, well, for some of us cold, some of us got feet of snow. I was heard from our guest, but Dward, welcome, man. You're back? How are you? How you feeling?
Yeah, we're good. Definitely no snow here. Low pressure system rolling through, but
I was gonna say you barely ever get snow, so I you're lucky.
Barely ever. I don't think we've ever had snow in this country. If there was, I'm not aware of it. I think there's only one place in the country you can grow strawberries that is cold enough for that. So, as I found out, yeah, I'm doing good. It's a great week. Great to be back again. What about yourself? How's it been?
Yeah, well, we're I'm trying to figure out the sleep schedule, right? I think last night, like I was telling you earlier, was 1:30 in the morning when we fell asleep because baby had a bad night, but hey, just getting used to it. It's one of those things. She'll keep us young. That's the ultimate goal. Yeah, she'll keep us young.
We've had two back-to-backs. My wife is the one who takes it on the chin most of the time when it comes to not getting enough sleep. Yeah. Apparently, I sleep like a log. I just don't wake up to anything, and she gets very upset with me about that.
I'm the same way. It's like I'll fall asleep and then I don't remember anything until I wake back up. But I always tell her, like, kick me, like punch me or something if you need. What can I do? I can't. I mean, she's feeding. I can't do anything. At this point, so I offer my help where I can and do what I need. So,
that's it.
Yeah, man.
Always fetch the water, fetch anything she needs, help her out, get the nappies.
Yeah,
be there.
You were telling me you got a big win, right? You got a big win, right before this week, right?
Yeah, we've had a big win. I can't talk too much about it at the moment due to NDAs, but we've had a great win. Something we've been working on, a partner of mine and I, for a few months now. And it got confirmed after a big meeting yesterday that it's happening. And it's great.
It's a key point, like something's it's not just going to happen like right away, right? It's a lot of these proposals and these follow-ups, I mean, you could probably count on multiple hands how many times you had to follow up with probably to keep the progress moving forward. You know what I mean? So
absolutely. Well, this one here is like one of those ones where the scope changed quite a lot a couple of times. The thankful part was it kept getting larger and larger as the scope went, and then everything else went up with it. So staffing, resources, cost, and also reward. So it's fantastic. We're excited. It's looking like it could be a 2-year commit. So that's even better. And happy days. So big smile from my side of town today.
That is awesome.
And we'll see how I feel in a month. I'm struggling to fill the 11 roles I have to go and find. But for now, super exciting.
That's all right. Yeah, that's a good problem to have. But so with that, so we have Mark Stiles, who's a CPA. He's going to be joining us today. And so Mark, we're definitely appreciate for him coming on. And for those of you that may not know Mark, he's a CEO of MAS CPA and a former D1 basketball captain at Stenson. So I'm definitely not going to play him in b-ball or a pickup game. So he knows a thing or two about discipline that it really takes to win. He's built this firm that doesn't just do taxes, but he's actually helping the trades and service-based founders turn their intuition into data-backed growth. So today we're going to be talking into a lot of that strategy, the support that kind of goes, and how he helps businesses go from owner-operator sort of chaos, as we talk about a lot, to structured leadership. So Mark, let's go ahead and kind of dive in, and welcome to the stage, sir.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. I gotta have you as my hype man to just follow me around and give me give me some introductions as I walk around, right? So
yeah, you're like, oh man, this is awesome. Let's do it. That's the thing. So I think we've been connected for a while, but that's probably something I didn't know about you, was that you were a D1 basketball star. Until I kind of dug a little bit deeper to kind of do a little bit of research for the show. But that's pretty cool. So what position? So what position did you play?
Looks like you might be on mute there, Mark.
Oh, Mark, you might be muted.
There he is. There he is.
There you go.
There we go.
Yeah.
These dang microphones, sometimes you hit them the wrong way, and I'm a hand talker, so either which way. No, so yeah, I mean, basketball was great. You know, it was for me, I'm 6'8". 25 years ago, 6'8" was basically a center or a power forward. I like to always think that I was a little bit early for my time because I was somebody that took people off the dribble and shot threes and stuff like that. But the bread and butter was always, footwork and in the paint. So, for me, as much as I'm always typically sitting down in a chair now, unless it's the thick of tax season and I got my standing desk set up and everything, normally I don't.
I was going to say, when you're on these Zooms, you can't really feel, like the height of somebody, you know what I mean? Like it's all the same rectangle for everybody. So
exactly. But if I were to go boom, right? Like you're like, okay, that's a tall guy, right? So yeah, but
I love it.
But no, I think where that was really good is exactly what you talked about. It just teaches you a different level of discipline. I mean, it was interesting because my son was going into band practice and he has to go. He's in elementary school and he has to go in at 7:30 every morning. And I was driving him in yesterday because he goes in not every morning, every Thursday. And I was like, and he was talking about how he's a little tired. And I'm like, hey, bud, when I was in middle school and high school, I drove in at 5:30 in the morning and went into a gym at 6 o'clock to practice from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock to then take a shower and go to class. And then after school had practice. And he was like, wait a minute, like you did like 4 extra hours of everything on top of school. And I'm like, yeah, that's also how I became a D1 basketball player. That's how I played over in Germany. That's how, that opened up doors, not only in the athletic world, but it also taught me that like working hard really isn't as cumbersome as people make it seem. It's just being willing to take that extra step. And,
right.
The way I always thought about this, and this is kind of what I've always said to anybody that, I mentor or anybody that, works under me is like, you might be smarter than me. I'm not sitting here saying I am, the smartest person in the world, but I'll outwork you. I will beat my head against the wall until I figure out how it's right. And I think that's a principle that you learn through athletics and things of that nature. If you really want to achieve a high level. Now, if you just want to have fun, you can get good enough where you can just have fun. But, but if you want to be an expert, if you want to really reach that, 10,000 hours, then it takes some discipline. And I think that's really important, and has been a really good thing that I've applied to my businesses, as well as I've applied to the clients that I work with, of really going, how do we instill discipline? And I think that's one thing that, with who we serve, trades and service-based industries, as well as high net worth individuals from the individual tax side, most of them have a little bit of that, that discipline. They've came up with something, or they've worked hard enough to achieve a certain status. And from there, is going, hey, how do we leverage this discipline that you already know and add some layers on that get your mind to open up a little bit differently? Because if you think of yourself as, hey, I'm really good at this, but I need help elsewhere, then we can probably build off of what skill, what service, what solution that you came up with, and truly scale that to a place where you're looking back and going, wow, like, look at what we did. Right. And so to kind of bring that full circle, when people bring up basketball or anything like that, I look back and I go, wow, look at what I did. Look where it took me across all the world. It took me across the whole states at first, and I'm going like, oh, this is cool, seeing all these cool places. Then it took me around the world, and then it also opened up doors in the business world that I never would have expected it to open up. So, that's kind of, taking that experience is really what we parlayed into MAS CPA, and then what we try to parlay into our clients of that. Hey, there's going to be a point where there's going to be satisfaction looking back, because you started with compliance, you built on some additional advisory arms from there, and then from there you took that advisory and compliance and realized what strategy truly is, and it opened up your doors. And so when we see some of our clients that are like, life is so much better now, it's better than I could have ever imagined, that's really when we go, this is that look back, right? Where you go, where I started, and look at how much discipline I had to get to this point. And then it's the conversation of, now don't stop. Don't get stagnant, right? Because stagnation is the antithesis of innovation, right?
Well, I say that all the time too, like, because if you stop moving, the world's not stop moving, right? So if you think that you're at your peak, you're just going to get passed by. And at the pace that things are moving in today's world, you're going to get passed by in months instead of years. Before you could let yourself, maybe give yourself a couple months and then you would be okay. But now it's like people are going to pass by. If you're not staying on top of your game and looking at the different, we talked pre-show, like strategy and the different ways you can innovate. And innovate doesn't mean how do I reinvent the entire business. Innovate is just how do I improve my business just a little bit, and I think if you're not constantly doing that, you're going to get passed by your competition.
100%. Innovation is not a one size fits all word, right? Innovation is different for every business in every capacity, because something that might be innovation to you might be common knowledge to another firm. But what that unlocks for you is much different than what that unlocks for them. Similarly, innovation for them might be something that's way forward thinking that you have no point or business being even involved in right now. Right. And it doesn't seem like, it seems like, oh, well, I need to keep up with that Jones. And the reality is it's not. And that's really where strategy comes in, is not, and a lot of people think that strategy is like, how do I make $1 million? How do I get that 9 figures that everybody on LinkedIn's talking about? How do I become that business coach out of all of these things all of these businesses that I've ramped up, which has become the common knowledge. And this is why the speed thing, Dave, is the reality, right? The speed is so much because there's abundance of information now, right? That some Gen Z person can spin up a business and go, you know what? I'm willing to beat my head against the wall, and you're still thinking, hey, I just know this better than everybody, right? And that's where they get that speed comes in. But when we dive into, true strategy is going, where am I at now? Where do I want to be? And what are the mission critical elements and the objectives that we need to obtain to get to where I want to be? And that's understanding where you are today and understanding what it takes to be at tomorrow. And that's truly strategy. And that's a more comprehensive look than just going, hey, how do I make 9 figures? Like everybody can throw out, hey, we can make 9 figures by doing this, or building our pipeline to do this, or, doing X, Y, and Z. And that's a portion of it. But where are you at now? And is that really realistic? And have you set the right milestones so that you don't, how do you say this the best way? If you don't create milestones within your goals, then you have a never-ending story that you're fighting towards, and that's kind of to keep us a little relevant with what Stranger Things, right? You have this never-ending story that keeps going on and on and on, right? I won't sing the song, but it's this never-ending story that goes on and on and on. Now, if you set up milestones and mission objectives and things of that nature, mission-critical objectives and must-win battles, when you reach those will give you a moment to kind of look back, to kind of what we talked about a second ago, just kind of take a small look back of, okay, so we've gone this far. Now we still need to get here. But hey, this is an achievement that we can sit on, and that's why I always talk about goals as a staircase, right? We're always taking steps forward, and we're thinking about the one critical thing that matters to get to that next step, right? And then if we can acknowledge that and accept the small wins that are building up to be that large win, that's how we can really make sustainable growth.
Yeah. I think the other thing is too is as you get those wins, it's really important to celebrate those. Don't take a minute and celebrate and acknowledge, because so many people are just so gung-ho going for the end goal. They just don't stop and, smell the roses. And they're like and they sit there and they look back and go, oh, you've come really far, but they don't celebrate enough of those smaller wins along the way.
Well, and I think that kind of goes into profit first. Obviously, everyone knows profit first, and I'm a member of that, but it's the profit piece of that, the profit bucket. When I asked a lot of the individuals a question, Mark, you may ask some of your business clients the same thing. When's the last time you took profit out? And they're like, oh, I just took that out last week, and it's like, okay, but what did you use it for? And they're like, well, I had to pay you like a utility bill, or I had to pay my mortgage or my car note or whatever it ends up being. But that's not profit, right? That's your lifestyle. So with that mindset, the profit account is meant to, like Dwarren, you were just saying, celebrate what you're actually doing in your business. So let it grow, and every quarter you take out, 40, 50% of it, and now you're doing something that's out of the ordinary, right? And depending on how good your profit was that quarter, you may go on a vacation, you may, go for a weekend getaway, you may just go to a nice steak dinner with your wife or your kids or whatever it ends up being. But now you're celebrating that every quarter, and now everybody in your surrounding, family, or even you can do something with your employees as well. But now they get bought in as well, because they're like, oh, this is for all the effort we just did in the last quarter. this is why daddy's gone, on the weekends, or taking the video I saw the other day when you own your business. It'll have you looking like you're in a toxic relationship because you're texting or taking phone calls in corners. You know what I mean? I think you said that to me or something like that.
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's why we're doing it, is because every quarter, we're doing all these things, or, we get to go to this year-end, trip that we do every year because business was good. And we had that habit of putting that money aside to actually celebrate what we're doing in our business. And I think a lot of people get caught up in the day-to-day and they forget to do that, So I don't know, Mark, how do you kind of approach that, especially with trades, right? They're so in the weeds, they love to do it. How do you kind of approach that with them? What Corner was saying?
I think I love the approach that you have of going, hey, take a vacation, celebrate it with that profit. But at a more simplified level, and the reality of what tradespeople and most people that are under about $1.5 million, right? The reality of what they're looking at. They're looking at their bank account. It doesn't matter about a vacation or anything. They go, how do I have a tax return that says I'm profitable of X and I only have Y in the bank, right? So even thinking about it, when your wins that you can take on a quarterly basis, if you're properly handling your business and you're profitable, even just looking and going, okay, my profit and loss statement says I made $150,000 this last quarter. And you're looking at a bank account that shows $150,000. Do you know how good that would make somebody feel who normally looks at their bank account and goes, "Holy cow, I need to get the next job."
Right.
Yeah.
So that I can pay for my payroll. And I think that's the thing. And this is that little area that sometimes gets skipped with small business owners to people that are reaching a point where they can scale and they can actually bring in leaders that love what they're doing. Because this is what goes on between 0 to about 1.5 is I love what I'm doing and I'm willing to put in the sweat equity to make this amount of revenue to get to this specific point. And then, if I'm lucky enough, I brought in the right people so that I can actually see a little bit of profit, but even 5% is great for me because I'm doing this all on my back and this is me and I am everything for every moment of every client that I'm working with. And then you get to that 1.5 in revenue and you're normally going like, I have more work than even 90 hours a week can cover, or I have problems that is not in my wheelhouse and I have to bring in somebody that loves it. And the beauty of when you're up at that 1.5 and you've actually been around for a long time, we can talk about an e-commerce company and get that in like 3 months, right? But if you're actually sustaining your business and you're bringing in amount that much, you're in a world where bringing in somebody that loves sales is where you should be, that loves operations is where you should be hiring, right? That loves, and then you should bring in those leaders because they're doing what you did from 0 to 1.5, but they're just taking a salary because they love doing that. They don't want to run a business. They want to build your pipeline, right? And so that's what's tough with those people that are, and a lot of our trades clients are in that, like, we're about to hit that precipice, but it really comes down to the discipline and how we're actually structuring ourselves. But from that 0 to 1.5 is more going like, I don't have any money to take a vacation. I haven't taken a vacation in 6 years. Right.
Well, but you hit this at the beginning because they look at one bank account, right? They let the money all come in and then it flows out. They have no idea what the purpose is for. And again, even if you have 150,000 for the year, do you have how much should go to taxes? Have you put that aside? And the other side
that's why profit first is great, right?
Yep.
Because you set up those wins.
Yep.
But that can be that win too. That's the only one thing I wanted to focus on. That can be the win of just looking at it and going, oof, all right.
Yep.
All right.
I'm set up.
Okay, maybe I got to put 30 or 40 away for taxes, but like, wow, I got 90 grand sitting here.
Yep.
90, 100 grand is sitting here that I can have some fun with, right?
And it's
like, or not have any fun and just leave it alone.
Yeah, right. Well, right. And on the tax side, right? And if they're that size, they should be an S Corp, or some sort of like better 100%. Structured tax, right? But what people don't realize, and I've had a client I just brought on, they have an accountant, but they're an S Corp, but they're not paying themselves right, the salary that you're supposed to be. And the side of that is that the business should be paying both sides of Social Security, Medicare for you, right? It's going to come out, but then you basically reimburse yourself so that you're getting. Yeah. And that's the beauty of the tax, is that it's not just the income tax; it's paying for all your taxes that as a business owner you have to do. And so that's what, like, those small things make you feel like a win. Like, one of the other clients that I have, he just started kind of implementing. He's like, dude, just seeing the accounts there and the money start to go in it. Maybe it's not a lot to start because you're not going to make this big shift, but it's just seeing it there is a win, because it's like, okay, I'm starting to build that habit, right? Profit is a habit, as Dwayne kind of pointed out earlier. But that's the beauty of it, is that you have these wins.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing too. Like, you can see, and this is where I'm going to be very honest, and I'm a geriatric millennial or end of Gen X person, so I will say this and sound like that crotchety old man. There's a lot of things that I think Gen Z does wrong. Yeah. One of the things that Gen Z has figured out is just the banking game. So let's not talk about business for a second. We talk about profit first and business perspective. You know, like, most Gen Z guys are like, oh, I can have a high yield savings account and most of my paycheck can go there, and then my disposable income can go in my checking account, and I can pay all my bills through a high yield savings account because I'm earning interest on all of that money, right? And then I'm paying my bills, and then if I'm doing that right, I'm probably getting some type of rewards too, and they're stacking all of these things. Yeah. And we all think it's crazy because, like, why would you have multiple bank accounts? Just have it, just direct deposits into your bank account, and you set up auto withdrawal, and then you hear Gen Z going like, why are you paying on their auto withdrawal dates? Why aren't you paying right when it's due and having that money sit for 10 days collecting interest rather than paying right when you get your paycheck? And it's things that you don't think about, but are very logical, right? And it's just taking the time to and this is where this really comes into it. You know, when I talk about, you know, I'm not smarter than everybody, but I'll bang my head against the wall until I get it right, and I'll do it over and over again. That's blocking off time. That's going, listen, I need to have thoughtful time where I can actually think about how these things can work. And if I don't have that time, then I'm just running. I'm a hamster in a hamster wheel, and I'm just running and running and running and running and running and running and hoping that one day something strikes gold for me, right? But if I have some of that time to think about it, which is honestly what all these Gen Z kids had to do when COVID happened and they couldn't go anywhere, and they're just sitting there reading business books and listening to LinkedIn and listening to all these people that are like, how can you make money right now? And luckily they went through a 5-year period where if you put any money in the stock market, you were making a mint, right? And so they learned some of these habits that weren't taught to us when it was a world of, hey, you work for somebody for 25 years, you get a pension, you don't ever have to work again, and you just sit on that pension until you die. Like, that was kind of the tried and true model all the way through the 90s, even through the early aughts. When we started getting to the 10s and 20s, is when people started going, wait a minute, I don't need to work for somebody for 20 plus years. I need to find whoever's going to give me the most money, and realize that businesses are going to take just as much as I'm going to take, right? And it should be that equal kind of 50-50. Well, nothing changes from an individual standpoint what these Gen Z people are doing and what business owners should do nowadays. And that's that exact same thinking. Hey, put some money that is your profit that you plan on making, and set that aside and make that a habit that you're consistently setting aside. You won't even notice it. And half of these POS systems that you guys are using have forced savings where you can create bins and they'll just throw them in there. Now, are they creating a lot of interest? Maybe, maybe not. You can look at all those things. American Express has some things. All these different banks have some things that'll give you an extra perk for that. But throw that money in there so that you can do exactly what you're saying, Dave. Just look at it and go, wow, this is what I've done, right? Because for a lot of, especially people in the trades industry and some things of that nature and service based, looking at the bank account is them looking at their financials. And, you know, making profit habits important, looking at your financial statements. We call it the Holy Trinity: your balance sheet, your profit and loss, and your statement of cash flows. Holy as in WHOLY, but a play on Holy Trinity, right? 3 statements create one picture, right? But if you're doing that, make that a habit, great. But most people don't. So then you need to set up your banking so that that's where you're going to look, that's going to give you your financial outcome for right now until you grow up a little bit. Then separate them out so that you can truly understand, because a lot of people don't. They'll see a windfall of money in there and they go, okay, I'll pay off my debt. Okay, well, that just ate into your payroll, your 3 months of payroll that you should have reserved. Oh, okay, I just got all this money, I'm going to pay off this, or I'm going to do that, and you're not thinking the game of like, how can I preserve my profit? How can my money make more money for itself? How can I play the game of leveraging debt properly? Yeah. And if you're thinking about all of those things, your business is operating in humble, right? And a lot of people aren't. So
interesting points there. Like, I've got a client of mine, for example, and he actually has his American Express card, and wherever possible, he will throw all the purchases on that. Then when it comes time, say, hey, I'm going to go to the US, or I'm going to go to New Zealand, or I'm going to fly off to the Philippines. He upgrades with points to business class, and this is the sort of thing where it's like, well, isn't that a lot of points? Yeah, but I've been paying off all my business expenses and supplier invoices with this. And then alongside that, he gets all these extra points. So just the other day, he's sitting there and he goes, oh, I've got like 1.2 million points. What do I do with these? I'm going to buy an iPad. So he got himself an iPad Pro, and then he's like, oh, I'm going to get a $500 gift card to JB Hi-Fi, which is, like a Best Buys in the US, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And he went and bought some accessories for that thing. And he's like, I've still got points left over. I'll save those for another day. But he got to reward himself by just changing, and that was possible by changing the way he spent. It was one thing that he changed a few years ago on the way he spent, and he was able to reward himself. But a lot of people are not aware of these simple little things they can do because they haven't got the person giving them the advice or telling them how it can be done. And you're right, there's a lot of bloody noise out there. You go online, there's so much noise. It's a lot easier when you just got one trusted individual who has an idea, who can share and help and mentor you.
Well, I think the biggest thing for some people too is the discipline. They're like, oh, I got this big American Express card, I'll put everything on, and then they see the money accumulating in their bank account, and they don't realize that they have this big liability that they got to pay, and they're like, oh, I'm gonna go spend, and then they overspend. It's like, oh shit, right? And now it's like, how am I gonna figure this? And now they're scrambling, and so it's you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and now you're just going down the rabbit hole. So it's really, if you are somebody like that kind of lacks that discipline, it becomes important to have somebody like Mark, right, or another advisor that can be working with you, that can give you those insights, right, and hold you accountable, and say, okay, well, why did you just spend this $10K? Like, you have a $50,000 credit card bill. Like, why aren't we paying that down? And those advisory work is important. So, and with that in mind, Mark, let me ask you this question, because I get this question asked a lot. I'd love to get your opinion on it. With everything happening in the accounting industry with like AI, where do you see the AI an impact on accounting, let's say in the next 18 to 24 months? What is that bookkeeper role in it? Because you do have a bookkeeping kind of arm of your firm. Where do you see that moving to in the next 18 to 24 months?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got to, if accounting firms aren't already diving into AI in certain, at least a minimal capacity, then you're way behind. That's just the reality. I mean, I think that the reality is listen, you're going to see all the software putting out AI related tools and things of that nature that can help with some of your efficiency and effectiveness. And you should evaluate all of those and also understand, similar to what I was talking about, how AI can do some of the things better than some of these SaaS-based companies. There's limitations in these SaaS-based companies for the AI that they can utilize because it takes over some of the tools that they have, right? So you got to realize that some of their stuff is not going to be really, the catch, what. It's an efficiency tool that you probably can figure out yourself, or you have figured out. But, I think it's very similar to this model. And I think over the next 12 to 18 months, for the longest time, the Big Four was employing a bunch of people overseas. Most of the people that you kind of see coming from the Big Four now, you can probably hire in India. And that's just a little tidbit from our industry. Like, they were always using them. They were always using them because it's cheaper labor, but it's also paying a really great price for a resource that's willing to work extremely hard. And it's a really fair price for them and where they're at. And I know, I know, Dwayne, you've got your kind of outsourced unit, so you know how this kind of works, right? Of like, hey, we got really top level clients that have touched a lot of things and done a lot of tasks. But that's something that was always going on. And now, it's just recently become really big for like smaller firms and everything, going, hey, why aren't we leveraging this talent? Right. Right. And I think AI is similar.
It's now mainstream accessible for them.
Everybody
as a resource.
Yeah. Like, it's not a stigma. There's not a stigma where like we used to have all these like disclaimers and everything if we had any outsourced units and everything. But I think AI becomes similar now, right? We've shifted from that outsource where that's become more mainstream to now, okay, yeah, of course you have people that do some work for you outsourced wise. Now we're starting to lean into leveraging AI. And the best way to think about AI, especially from an FP&A standpoint, is it is a great intern. And that intern is going to be as strong as how you teach it, right? And if you approach it that way, then you're going to let that AI tool scale like you would an intern. And I think that's how you have to think about it right now, because I think within 12 to 18 months, especially as you kind of get into more mainstream agentic AI and things of that nature, then you're leaning on AI to be that strong intern for you that's going to give you that information, and then it's your job to do something with that information, right? So when we get into agentic, and if you've taken the right step stools of 12 to 18 of going, hey, I'm working with it as an intern for right now and making sure it's learning, right? And then going, how do we add this agentic element on it? Then you're going to pace with what all these other companies are doing, these AI companies that are spitting up, these people that are going to throw you emails constantly about agents and all these things that you have. But instead of just jumping on the first person that sent you a cold email and said, hey, I can streamline all your processes and make them better, you're working with a tool that you're familiar with and then adding on. And I think that's how our industry is going to see it, and that's how they're going to use it as they feel more and more comfortable. And then I think when you get to that 18-month mark, you're having agents that are doing some tasks that somebody is required to oversee, right? And then going, okay, and doing kind of that reviewing capacity. So where does our firm kind of shift to? Less of a doer and more of a reviewer, right? Where the expertise comes at the review level, not at each level, right? So, if you think about a traditional firm today, you've got preparers have a good solid understanding of the code, or bookkeepers that have a solid understanding of accrual or cash-based accounting, and they're applying those principles right now. And then that goes up to a reviewer that has done it for years and years and years, and then if there's a more complex task, then we're leveraging the expert that's in the firm to kind of take on that task, right? Where I think in the future, we're looking at more agentic functionality that's coming up with that initial preparation of that tax return, of your books, of your financial, your quarterly report, breaking down the different facets of what's going on within your business. And then there's going to be more of that reviewer level, which means your staff's got to step up, right? And then from that reviewer level, then you have that extra level if there needs to be complexity. So I think what ends up happening is your staff starts elevating, and if they don't elevate, you're replacing with somebody who is elevated and willing to take that next step. And that agentic layer that's going to be at the bottom is going to be doing all of the menial tasks and doing all of the number crunching, because the accuracy there and the lack of human error can be in place there. Now hallucinations can happen, right? But that lack of human error is there, so then the reviewer can come and apply their expertise. And so I think what we have to do as firm owners is cultivate our teams to understand that right now you should be leveraging that as your intern, right? Like if you're a preparer, leverage that as get comfortable with it. Now have the right guardrails in place, have the right WISP, have everything that you need to have. And those are all topics that we can dive into another time, but having that security layer so that you're not letting out personal information and you're not giving away too much of, of your secret sauce and all of that stuff. Right. But having it so that it can be something that they're comfortable with, and then understanding that their job is going to shift into a more of a reviewer role. So those SOPs shift a little bit. What is expected to get done at each level shifts a little bit, but that's how AI works. If you don't have a degree, it gives you a degree. If you got a degree, it gives you a master's. If you got a master's, it gives you a PhD. So if you're leveraging it that way, then the 12 to 18 months as an accounting firm with AI is going to be just like building up, entry-level staff, right? And then, but the key point is that inflection point, and about probably between the speed of way things are going, between 6 and 12 months, where you're going to realize that there are agents out there that it can do a lot of what your entry-level staff can do. And how do you can maintain your culture as a firm, but also elevate your staff or find the right staff that can do that review level and is comfortable there.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. One, it's going to give you way more capacity, right? And then I think two, you have to get comfortable shifting into, I think you said it, understanding the numbers and then explaining it, right? Because with your clients specifically, you can't pitch anymore. Hey, let me take all this, basic stuff off your plate. Like you're like, hey, we're going to do this as like a bonus. Like, here's what we're really going to help you with. Like, we're going to give you the information to make better financial decisions. We're going to give you that information, that accountability. What we were talking about kind of at the beginning of the show, right? About just having somebody there that's on your side as a partner. That's, I think, also where if you are a bookkeeping firm specifically, and that's all you do, you have to be comfortable getting into that advisory role. And if you're not, I think ultimately then you have to maybe find a partner or something like that is comfortable with that. And then you kind of learn how to manage like the AI side of it and the agent side of it. And if you don't want to
Yeah,
get
and
that advisor
in this industry, I think it's important to understand too. In this industry, there's rainmakers and there's workhorses, right? And there's workhorses that are going to be they love doing their tasks. Very similar to what I was talking about CRO or ops person. They love doing that. So as your business is scaling, you need to be thinking about, hey, who's my rainmaker and who's my workhorse, right? Because the rainmaker is going to bring the business in, the workhorses are going to get the work done, and it's important to know kind of where your staff fits in that area, and applying what we talked about earlier, that discipline of going, these are our guardrails here. And I think that's really, really important for firms to really understand kind of going forward, or you're going to kind of get left behind. Because, even when we look at what we've offer with our bookkeeping, we don't offer, like, there's like some clients that want to do, hey, I just want bookkeeping. I don't want anything else. All right, cool. You're our minimum rate, but we purposely create package solutions for our bookkeeping clients that include tax preparation, bookkeeping, and then some form of advisory. And we do that purposely, right? We have three different levels. We have our startup, which is really from our zero to $1 million. And that's really making sure that your compliance is lock and step, right? And making sure that that's good. You get a quarterly meeting, where we can go over some advisory, but our bookkeeper's job is to take all the information, provide you all of your financials every month and everything, and kind of nudge you on taking a look at those, right? And then you have your quarterly meeting, and then our scale is normally between 1 and 3 million, and that's normally for somebody that they want a little bit more of a monthly touch base with the CFO, so they need that monthly advisory. We step up the bookkeeping hours and things of that nature. And then we have our sustain, which is normally when you start building in your leaders. And so then we're talking to more than just you as a CEO. We're talking to your sales lead. You're talking to your operations lead, your finance lead, your people and leadership lead. And so those all come with different levels of advisory, because software alone, let's not even say AI, like just lump that into software, is doing a lot of the heavy lifting now. So where there's not that heavy lifting, there's the ability to jump on ChatGPT or a Claude or whatever, especially Claude with what it's kind of putting out now, right? And going, hey, do this for me, right? Or help me do this, right? And people smart enough business owners can do it themselves, right? The difference is going to be, how do you help lead your customers into a success trajectory that's going to help them? Because the beauty of a CPA, a bookkeeper, a tax preparer is, you've seen how many different businesses that have came through your company. Like, you've had those conversations on how you can optimize that in different capacities. You need to become an advisor, and from the preparation staff all the way to the executives have to have that advisory thought process first, because people aren't coming to you to understand how to make an S Corp election. They're coming to understand why an S Corp election matters when they're making over $100,000 in revenue a year. That's the difference. And if you can explain that, then you've really solved the problem for the client. And that's the new thing for CPA firms, bookkeeping firms, tax preparation firms. It's not about, hey, there's death and taxes and you need to come talk to me, right? There's death and taxes and you can get those done, but we can show you a path of how you can work forward and be more successful and minimize or optimize your tax liability, right? And grow your profit, and as well as you're growing your top line revenue, right? Building out and understanding the goals that you have and helping you see if you're tracking the right way. That's where the industry is going as a whole. Instead of just doers, we're advisors, and advisors aren't necessarily just doing all the work and going, here it is. And if you really want to know, I'll walk you through in a 30-minute walkthrough, right? Advisors are going, hey, I noticed this, and I want, to align with your goals, you need to be looking at this, this, and this, and this is what's going to happen. So perfect example of that. When we talk about this S Corp election, because I know you brought it up earlier and some things of that nature, right? But when we're dealing with an S Corp, if I see that you're a Schedule C filer, which means you file under your 1040, under a schedule called Schedule C, which is basically for self-employed individuals, right? Regardless of, you set yourself up an LLC and you got an EIN, but you didn't do anything else, right? You are a disregarded entity with the IRS and you file a Schedule C. But if you make over $100,000 in revenue and you're service-based, which is most of our, your self-employed people or your trades or something like that, I can normally show you on your tax return where self-employment taxes are greater than your actual taxes. And you go, well, why am I getting taxed 45%. Well, because you're getting these self-employment taxes, and when we can go into and step you up and look at your entity and go, hey, you actually work better as an S corporation, and what does that do? That transfers self-employment taxes, which are just glorified Social Security and Medicare, and transfer that to your salary rather than your profit. Then you're immediately saving money on taxes. Like, those are things that people don't understand. They just heard, hey, somebody on TikTok told me to set up an S Corp, and then I can have more tax advantages. Just like people on TikTok tell you that you can set up an LLC and funnel every expense through your business, which is not true, right?
Right. I mean, it's not true. I mean, I start making that like assumption around like 45, 50,000 for some people too, you know, in terms of net revenue, you know, because you can totally still even save a few $1,000s. And then if you pay yourself, you could pay yourself like a quarterly, you know, salary. You don't even have to pay yourself monthly and save some of the payroll costs. So it really depends on what's their strategy. Yeah. There's that whole strategy side. Yep. Exactly. It's like,
And just so we be clear, if you drop on AI, I'm pretty sure AI tells you around 75 grand. So there you go. You got two professionals telling you 40 to 50, 100, and then AI is telling you 75. But but we always say this, like every and I always say this to my clients, right? Every CPA or every accountant or advisor is going to give you a different barometer on when that step up place is, and it's normally just, you know, looking at your financials, looking at where you're going and what your direction is, and then going, okay, this is where it is, because you can maybe read the tea leaves at 50 grand and go, listen, let's get this compliance stuff out of the way right now. Right? Like, let's get it over with. Let's get your elections in. Let's make sure you're in a good place. And then, hey, because next year you're going to make $300,000 and you're going to scale that quickly. Let's get this out of the way so we're not having it after the fact, because I think this is probably why you advise it too. I can't help you for 2025 in February of 2026. Can't really do that much. We can do a couple things, but we don't have many levers, right? But if we look at that and we're advising you throughout the year, then we have so many more levers that we can pull to looking at how we can optimize your tax position, your profitability, you know, where you're strategically directed towards as well.
Yeah, and for me, ultimately, I try to stay away from the taxes, which is why I like guys like Mark and other tax partners of mine. That's like, you guys focus on that, you know. Like, I mean, I'll do it, you know, if I need to, but ultimately, it's like you guys love that game, so I'm good with it.
So what I'm hearing is it's about the personalized service, right? It's the personalized service that you're offering as a firm now, as opposed to just crunching the numbers. And it's very similar to a lot of other industries. There's been the people doing the basic work in the background. And one thing we're noting in a lot of industries now is the AI is a multiplier. And it's a multiplier that's allowing menial tasks to get done quicker, that the people who were previously hired to do those menial tasks and happy just to sit there forever doing it are no longer going to have access to doing those roles as much, because there's tools out there that can do it for them. So they need to step up. They need to learn new skills. They need to become of more value to the customer and to the business that they're representing as well in a lot of cases. So they can actually become a multiplier along with the tools they're using.
Well, and that it doesn't even just apply to like CPA firms, right? That personalization is in service base, in any sort of business, right? B2B, you know, how do you think through what you're providing as an outcome and a benefit to your clients or to your customers, and make it more of a personalized experience, right? Because that's ultimately why people decide to stay, as experiences. And we can go into a whole show on that, you know what I mean? But I get the one thing I wanted to kind of dive with you, Mark, is you were kind of saying pre-show, you know, you want, and you focus with a lot of your service-based clients, right? Top and bottom line, right? Yep. And so walk me through that, because obviously I had some, you know, kind of add-on, I think, or I'm sure it's things that you do as well, but I think it's something that's missed by a lot of people. So I want you to kind of explain that idea, that, you know, thought process that you kind of focus on, and then we'll go a little bit more into that.
Yeah, and I mean, I won't lie. It comes very much like an improv mindset. And something that everybody's heard, the yes and, right? Like, and I think when you're looking at everything strategically in business, it's like yes and that's normally what's going on. And when we're talking about, you know, growth and we're talking about strategy, a lot of the times there's a focus, right? There's a focus on like, hey, how do we increase top line revenue, right? And that's great. Like, but if you don't have the team to support that, and you haven't had the foresight to think about the profitability of that additional revenue, then you run into a situation where you have top line growth and you have bottom line either stagnation or decline. And that's not the goal of your growth trajectory. Now, and it used to be this model of like, hey, SaaS-based companies, we're going to run our company into the ground. We're going to continually ask for money until we hit an inflection point where we make enough of a multiple to sell. And that's the reality of what it used to be. And I was fortunate enough to go through a $30 million exit 16 years ago, I think at this point in time. And that was 100% what it was. Hey, how much can we bring in? How much top line can we bring in? We'll make a VC or PE company extremely happy. They'll see that top line revenue. They'll immediately give us X, whatever, in as a payoff, to kind of take over our business and kind of run with that. And then the beauty of that was being there long enough to also see when the PE company realized that under the hood there was no profitability and the money was just being hemorrhaged, and a whole strategic decision needed to be changed of, hey, are we a professional services company? Are we a software company? Are we a mixture of both? And what is the proper mix, right? To then fast forward to 2024 when I was fortunate enough to go through a $100 million exit with a SaaS-based company where the rule of 40 is everything. And it's going, hey, are you showing growth? Are you also showing momentum in your profit? And are we able to line those two things up so that it so you can be a viable business? And that's how, if you think about it, if it's evolving at that level, right, of going, hey, top line's great, bottom line matters just as much, then why shouldn't it matter at a smaller level, right? And why shouldn't you try to mimic some of the expectations that these firms have when they're buying bigger companies in your own business? And maybe not to sell, so that you can sit there and you can, like what Dave and I were talking about earlier, so you can sit back and look at that profit bank account that's accumulating all of that profit that you had game planned for, right? Those are those types of things that you need to keep in mind. So when we're talking about top line and bottom line revenue, the yes and conversation should always come up. Okay, great. We got a pipeline of this. We have an expected strike rate of 30 to 40%. Great. So that means we're going to bring in X amount of revenue. Well, how do we make that revenue profitable? If we know that bringing in $1 million more in top line revenue is going to mean that we need to bring in 5 different resources that all total up to basically double of our payroll, we're probably not sitting in the same profitability realm as that we were expecting. Now, level setting that through your strategy and going, hey, we're willing to take a 10% cut from our profitability because we're going to bring in X amount. That's a whole different conversation. But the focus should always be a yes and especially when we're talking about top end and bottom line, considerations, right? Yes, we're bringing in X amount of revenue, but how much, and how much profitability do we expect to have? And that should be kind of the mindset that you have throughout your strategic meetings, as well as what you're putting in place each month, each quarter, each year.
And I think the biggest piece that I want, like, listener, if you're listening to this, right, like, we're not talking bottom line. Well, and maybe maybe we can clarify, Mark. Like, we're not talking like bottom line profitability right now. Like, ultimately, when you're a business owner, and I've talked about this before, you have to truly understand your gross profit margin, right? Like, that's the number one key metric that you need to understand for your business if you want to grow, especially service-based businesses, right? If you don't dial in your one, what it needs to be, and two, your process to make sure that you get it every single time, you are costing yourself money, right? So, like, yes, great, you made $1 million in revenue, but what's your gross profit margin, right? If you made $10,000 more, how much is that going to add to your bottom, to cover overhead, or how much is that going to add to your bottom line, right? Because I've had recently a lot of conversations with people because we are looking at their gross profit, and they're like, yeah, I just bid these 3 jobs, okay. How much were they? And all they're focused on is top line. When they're trying to solve an overhead or a cash flow hole, and they're like, oh yeah, I just brought in 3K. It's like, okay, but yeah, 3K is like half of that's going to your people, So, like, are you sure you quoted it right? So then when you break it down, the process wasn't there, right? And so we had to build out the process for them to make sure, like, hey, here's how you're actually going to add up all the cost. Here's your estimation process, and then enter your gross profit. And then it's going to give you the price that you need to quote, instead of trying to figure it out on the fly and be like, oh, I think I can discount this one, or no, you have to hit that number. And then because a 5% price increase can actually increase your net profit by 20, 30, 50%, depending on where you're at, And so that's why it's really huge. Not just I know if you're trying to exit, top line's good, but you can focus top, but also understand, like, what's that middle number, which is your gross profit, because that's the main number.
That's the yes and, right? Like,
Yep.
yeah, okay, we want to bring in this much revenue. How much is this revenue going to cost us? Okay. All right. And then what is the rest? What else is coming in there? Because do we really have a gross profit? We've seen this, like we had a manufacturing firm that we worked with, and the whole thing was, I can get you 1.7 more in profit if you just improve your gross profit by 50%, right? You do that, you improve that by 5%. Sorry, 5%. You improve that by 5%, you're gonna have 1.7 more in profit next year. How does that work? Okay, well, you have tons of cost of what it costs to actually make that, but then you combine that with going like, okay, so then why don't you have that money in your bank account now? Okay, well, let's look at what you're paying your salespeople. Okay, do your salespeople have a quota, and are they expected to bring in that amount? And does your commission structure work in that favor to align with that? And if not, then we have an SG&A problem, so a selling and general administrative expense problem that we need to dive in and understand. But I think that's that. When you talk about it, yes, gross profit's important, especially for like trade-based businesses and stuff like that. Service-based, sometimes they don't really have cost of goods sold, right? They're going right to their bottom line because it's really their salary and maybe staff salary. Now you can still break that out and go, okay, what does it actually cost to do that? But I think there's three kind of areas that people forget to really focus in on when we're talking yes and. If we're bringing in X amount of top line revenue, okay, great. What is that top line revenue going to cost us? Okay, and what is that revenue going to cost us, right? And what does it cost to get that revenue, right? So not what does it cost to obviously getting the revenue is the cost of acquisition. What is that CAC, right? What is that cost of acquisition? How much is it going to cost that salesperson to get that? Because that's not part of your gross profit. That's selling and general administrative expenses, right? That's one of your ands. Your other and is how much does it cost to actually produce that product? That gets you to your gross profit, right? And what else are we paying for? Right. So then you've got, hey, sales is going to cost me this much. If I'm going to bring in this much, I want to make this much in profit. And that's your expense runway. It's simple math, guys. It's addition and subtraction. A lot of people make CPAs seem like we love being statistical and analysts and all of these things. There's financial analysts for that. Like most CPAs are doing plus and minus, right? And it's not really that complex, right? But it's thinking about it the right way and understanding how each impacts, right? So if your cost of acquisition is significantly higher than your gross profit, you're never making money. Like that's the reality, right? And so then you have a selling and general administrative expense. So if those tools that you're using, if that person that you're paying spiffs to and paying a salary as well, all of that outreach that you're doing and marketing you're doing, if those are all costing you a kit and caboodle, then you're already eating into your profitability. So understanding that is your first thing that you need to understand from that revenue that you're bringing in. What is it going to cost us to bring in that revenue? Then what is it going to cost us to produce that revenue? And then, okay, yes, we know those two things now. And what else is there that we need to really look at to make sure that we can make that profit, right? Because that expense runway is that simple math. Hey, we want to make this much profit. We're going to bring in this much revenue. It's going to cost us this much. So there's only a small little delta that's there. How are you going to manage that? And how do you properly manage that? And that's where the discipline comes in of going, no, we're going to make 25% profit, net profit. Boom. 25%. So then if I'm at $1 million, we're going to make $250,000. Okay. So I only have $750 in between. Like that's it. That's my expense runway, period, between cost of acquisition, cost of goods sold, and everything else. Right. And I think that's kind of where, that top line and that bottom line is extremely important, especially with our target market. If you're between 500 and 5 million in revenue, like that's where we need to be focused on those three elements, and everything else is just noise, right? And honestly, after the first two elements of what does it cost us to get that revenue, and what does it cost to produce that revenue, the rest is really noise. And other than a couple little things of maybe paying like leader salaries and insurance, do we really need that? And those need to be those, hey, these are the silent drains that we're seeing. Like, do you really need this stuff, right? Like, because that's all going to eat away at that 25% that we want to get. And, and that's kind of where then we can start celebrating those wins. And then if you're actually earning that, you can have bigger discussions. Hey, maybe we can increase this budget. By increasing this budget, what do we need? Then you work backwards. What does top line need to be? And how do we need to control that cost of acquisition? How do we control that cost of goods sold? So it's all the elements that we have to
that's where like those two numbers combine. What is your lifetime gross profit margin for either client, and then what is your CAC? And we've talked about it, the golden ratio on these shows too, is that you need that to be at least 3 to 1, right? Between customer lifetime gross profit margin to your actual cost to actually bring in that new client. And if you're less than that, then you need to either, one, you need to increase your price because you're probably charging too less, right, in order to increase your gross profit margin. 2, increase the length of time that they are working with you, or they're repeating, how often do they repeat? Or you need to look at your spending for your marketing and reduce where you're actually, marketing, because it's obviously not efficient enough. And so that's why it's really important, when you talk about those things, Mark, is that you have to know these numbers as a business owner.
Yeah.
I think it was,
and listen, you got to know too, you should have a 30 to 40% strike rate. If you're sitting here telling me that you got an 80% strike rate, you have a pricing problem. And I can almost guarantee you that you have a lot less money in your bank account, which is where you're predominantly focusing on, right? Is what's in your bank account. You don't have enough in there, and you're thinking about what. And good.
I was gonna say, the people that get into that are the ones that are really struggling, because you're like, I need this, right? Yep. And so they're like, I need to make every sale, so they're willing to negotiate. They're willing to discount their full service
discounts.
Exactly. And then they're the ones that get into that, and then it's a cycle. It's just a negative rotating cycle of their business, and then they're struggled. They end up like me with no hair, and so it's it's one of those things where it's just it's crazy. But
yeah, the more
you're really quiet.
Yeah, well, I'm not an accountant, obviously, so I have a slight. When I hear that some of this stuff is like just makes a lot of sense, but I think about it from a contractor point of view, right? You go out, you quote a job, you quote how many men are going to go out and how many man hours to do the job. You take into consideration things like weather and circumstance and delay. Then you've got other things you got to take into consideration, like, do you own the equipment? Do you have to rent the equipment? All of these little things. Do you have all the tools to do the job? Do you have to buy the tools to do the job? Does the material cost? Have you already pre-purchased it? Is there something that could go up? There's so many different variables in these things. So if you get this wrong with those numbers you're talking about, you can quickly end up costing yourself a lot of money to deliver a contract that you've quoted. And many years ago, one of my good friends was telling me he was a contracts director for Rio Tinto, BHP, and a lot of other big firms doing mining. And he was saying that he would look at the contracts of these small guys who would come in, and he'd look at it and he'd hand it back and he'd go, it's too low. You're not going to be able to deliver it. Go and try again, without accepting it. And they'd look at him, no, I'm trying to win the bid. No, you're not going to win it, because we don't trust you're going to be able to deliver the job. Trust me, we know. Did you know that our induction process is a 2-day process? That's for every time you send someone new to site. You're going to lose 2 days of man hours every time you send someone to site. And every site requires that they do that on that site. There's 10 sites on this job project. Have you factored in those 20 days? Oh, no, I didn't know that. So go and ask more questions. Go and requote it. Because, and unfortunately, this is just the reality. When you're in a desperate mode, and one thing we talk about pre-show is like a lot of contractors are jumping from one trade, they're jumping from one job to the next job to pay the next one. You get into a mode of desperation at that point. You just need that next job to come in. You'll take whatever you get. And sometimes you sit there going, oh shit, that's got not as much profit as I thought it did. Or that's going to require a different tool that I didn't know I needed, or a different piece of machinery I didn't know I needed. I misjudged that. And you can't, unless you've got your documents and your contracts and your scopes, with the variation clauses in them, you're screwed. You got to deliver it. So there's a lot of little moving factors. So the profit makes a big, big difference. And when you're saying that, if the bank account is sitting there low because you've got a high strike rate, I totally get what you're saying. I've seen this, I've witnessed this, I've experienced this in the past. And I told myself, I'm building a portfolio. It's okay. But the reality is you're just taking every job that comes down the road because you're like, well, I don't know when the next one's coming. But if you factor in enough profit,
take the same yes and principle. When next time somebody's like, yeah, I built a company to 9 figures, and what was your profitability?
Exactly. And they
because like all these people are telling you they listen, all the noise is telling you how to grow your business and but they're only thinking about growing revenue, right? Yes, we can go out and cold call 1 million people. We can do all of these things, and we can put all of these things in place and these referral networks, and we can do all of these different things. And listen, technology can do X, Y, and Z and all these things to bring them in. But if you're not thinking about what it costs to get that revenue and what it costs to produce that revenue, then you're pretty much always going to be taking on a new job to pay for the last one, because you haven't taken out. And like the best businesses are sitting on proposals for a while. They're thinking about everything that you're talking about, doing, is like going, hey, what do we have for, like, is there going to be delays? Do I need to have buffer? And the funny thing that I always see with the trades is like, we're not putting a markup in there. All right, it costs me this much, so I'm going to bill this. And you're like, wait a minute, put 50% markup in there. Well, I only want to make 35% on it. Great. You know how many times that client's going to come back to you and say, this isn't right, and you're going to have to send somebody out, which costs you $1,500 a day? Right. Oh, I didn't even think about that. Exactly. That's why we want to bake in. So we talk about profit first with regards to what's in your bank account and things of that nature. But that mentality and that habit is not just a habit of where you're putting money once you receive it. It's where you're thinking about it throughout the whole process, right? If I'm thinking, hey, my profit has to be baked into this proposal so that I'm not just paying for the next job, I'm actually giving buffer to the next job. Then you're starting to think properly on how your quote should be, how, and then you can sit there and go, okay, I lost 15% of what my target goal was, but I was never expecting to make the 50%. I was expecting to make 35, and that 15 was basically my buffer, right? That was my buffer to make sure I can actually hit that.
Right.
So,
and what James, who was our guest last week, like, I think it's a good point, James. Like, every industry has average gross profit margins, average net, and that should be right where you look and start. Because it means half the people are below it, half the people are over it, and the means of averages, right? So where do you want to be? Do you want to be that budget-friendly option and be known as that, which is basically you have to fight for every job based on price, and then you have to do a numerous number of jobs? Or do you want to give good results because you can spend more time, depending on what you're doing, especially if you're services? Do you want to spend more time giving that more high quality, and you have a higher profit margin because you're able to do it that way? So look at your national averages, right? And again, they're long track. They're not new. The only thing that's really new now is the AI world. But CPAs have been around for a while. Like, look at their average margins. If you're looking at or you're looking at landscape or anything has long industry averages. Look at those to start.
If you don't know what it is,
the only thing I'd say to James,
call around.
Yeah. The only thing I would say to James is business is just as much psychological as it is the numbers, as it is the doing and everything too. And sometimes using national averages isn't going to stick with a client. So do we want to benchmark? 1000%, James, 100%. Right. We want to benchmark and go, hey, most people in your industry are here. But if you're jumping in and coming in that advisory role, you need to know where they are currently and where you can easily optimize them to give them at least a starting point, right? Because then, hey, if you can hit 15% on a regular basis, but then we know that national averages are 25%. Once we start getting into that consistency and that discipline of always hitting that, then we can start going, okay, great. We've established where you're comfortable at. Now I need to make you uncomfortable because the national averages are this. So we had an acupuncture client. So you can imagine touchy-feely. A lot of, hey, I want to make sure that the customer's always feeling well about the pricing that we're having. I don't feel comfortable with them doing, that. And we had to strip back a little bit. I couldn't just go, hey, most acupuncture studios are making this, or wellness studios are making this. I had to go, okay, well, first off, let's just talk about where you're at. Where's your salary at? Are you paying yourself the right way? No, I'm not. Okay, let's look at your profitability. Are you actually able to cover all of the? No, I'm actually not. We had to get past that by just going in calculation and going, okay, so if you raised your rates $25 per visit, you're going to hit all of your target goals that you were striving for right now, right? Yes, I was. Psychologically, that's a win for them. Then psychologically, you've just built a better rapport with a new client, right? Then you start going, all right, cool. So now the next step for you is to understand that now that we got you regulated and you understand that pricing matters and pricing can actually change everything. In 1 month, it changed it for them, right? So now let's get you up to our national or regional averages that we have here, through phone calls, through looking up Gartner, through all these different things and going, hey, how we need to get you here. So let's talk about how we can get you here. And then that sticks a little bit better. So it's not, I wouldn't I don't argue with James on using national averages. I think that's a great benchmark to use. I think we also got to think, especially where a client is in their life cycle of, hey, where do we start with them of building in that discipline? Is it just strictly on national averages so that they have these lofty goals that they might not be able to reach? So then that doesn't give them that staircase of successes that they can lean on? Or do we understand where they are, speak to that, and get them to a good place where you're not only building a rapport, but you're also instilling discipline, and then start introducing some of those more complex metrics and things to benchmark against, because then they're a little bit more comfortable, right? Because I can tell you,
I would say like it does definitely comes down to understanding where you're at. So if you're just getting into business, like that's a good place to start. Like don't set yourself up for failure, right, by not understanding what the industry average is. And if you're an existing, same thing. The mindset there is like, we don't want you to make an overhaul completely. Like let's just go. No. Like let's say the industry average is, for example, 50% gross profit margin, and right now you guys are sitting at 35. Okay, let's go 3 or 4%. You know what I mean? To start, and then every quarter or every half a year, you can make a little more change to that until you're up, right? Exactly. So that you get there eventually. You know what I mean? And I think ultimately, the idea is that if it's an established company, take your time, as you were kind of saying, right, Mark? Like take your time, understand where you need to put that place, and that's the advisory role of it. Is that you're literally advising them and keeping them accountable to make and get up to there. And and to James' point, right? Yeah, we are worried about the health of the company. You are right, but you sometimes, as to Mark's point, they do have a lot of clients, right, that they may lose if they do a drastic shift. To go from 30 to a 50% gross profit margin could be a huge, right, increase in pricing, and so sometimes it makes sense to do that depending on the number of clients and what you think you might actually lose. But sometimes a phased approach over, a 2 to 8 quarter approach makes more sense too, because you're not going to piss people off. And I think it also comes down to how do you message that too? Do you message it as, hey, we're just making our pricing increases just because we want more money? Or do you actually explain the reasoning and then actually have that conversation with them?
Yeah, and I think you got to understand too, when you're dealing with small business owners, yes, they are your client and you care about the business, but they are the business. And I think you got to realize that until they get to the point where they have other leaders, which is normally an inflection point back to where we talk about like 1.5 million and stuff like where they can actually afford to bring in leaders and stuff like that. A lot of the times they are the chief everything officer. So the moment that they see that retention drop, when they're like, oh my God, 5 clients have said no, right? Even though 5 might have said yes to the increase, right? 5 said no. And then psychologically, they're like, I can't keep hemorrhaging all of these clients. They're not seeing the bigger picture of you raised rates. And so they kind of normalized it, right? They're seeing clients I'm getting churn, and that churn is giving me anxiety. And that anxiety that I get is affecting how I'm willing to stay consistent with the pricing, or I'm going to revert back to my old ways. And if you want the customer going back to the client and business thing, if you want that client to stick with you and you have the company's best interest in mind, you've got to think about the psychological standpoint of that with a chief everything officer that will go, listen, he told me to raise my prices. I did that and I lost 15 customers. And all he thinks about is, or she thinks about is the 15 customers I lost and what potential revenue I lost there. And it's not necessarily front and center that, 20 of them all took my higher thing. So as time goes on, I'm going to start realizing that I'm a lot more profitable. But that psychological standpoint really comes into place there, that we've got to manage at the same time that we manage what's right for the company.
Yeah, and I think you can also balance that out a little bit. And this is one thing that I've tried with, and I've worked with clients on before, is with many service providers, one of the things that we see in the IT industry is they're trying to standardize pricing. And there's different value propositions they can add in that conversation as to why they're increasing. There's different conversations around compliance, cybersecurity. Every industry has their extra service value adds. At that point, you can increase your profit margins on those add-ons and use them as the tools to get you that next level if you need to. But you can also go the other way, where you can go back to your vendors and talk to your vendors about getting a bit of a break. How many small business owners are so caught up in the weeds that haven't gone back and asked for a better price from their vendors or suppliers for God knows how long? You can pick up an extra few percent, 5% saving, just because you've got, and you can have that conversation. Hey, look, I've got this many clients now. I'm projecting to have this many clients. If I can get to that level, will you give me a better buy break to get to that level? And will you stage me out so I can get to that level? What do I need to do to make that happen? And that could get you a higher profit margin today without actually even going to a client and talking to them about a better rate.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's definitely one of those things. Listen, my chief of staff manages our whole tech stack, right? And she always pulls me in at the end because I'm always coming in and going, okay, can you give me a better price? Like and she goes, I would never think about just asking that. And that's more common than not common, right? Of going, hey, can you give me a better price? How can you give me better terms? Hey, so I'm really looking at this, and this is an area that I really needed. Can you give me a break on that until that's in your pipeline and in your roadmap? Yeah. And those things are there. And we can talk a lot about when and timing and things like that. You go at the end of the month, you get it in the quarter, you're going to get even a better break, right? So thinking about those things are obviously important, right? But you should always ask for those things. And I think that's something that is kind of what we were talking before the show, is not only thinking about today, but where's tomorrow at, right? Like, so, and then that's really what true strategy is. It's not looking at everything from just very high level metrics that you hear and that you need to focus on. It's also dialing in to the minutia and going, hey, where can we squeeze out, more, so that, that everything else, we talked about the cost of acquisition, we talked about the cost of goods sold, that everything else that also helps you run your business, are we really maximized there? Is the software at the right price point for us? Or do we need to think about something more manual, right? And that's the thing too, is the shiny object what we really need? Or do we need something that just does the work, right? And I think you got to always kind of think about that so that you can align what you need today with where you want to be tomorrow.
Right, for sure. Well, and so, go ahead. Go one more thing.
Sorry. Just with that too, I mean, it's like you mentioned earlier, like the TikTok videos, the YouTube videos, everybody's a bloody expert, right? Online, on socials, and stop listening to every expert out there. Find yourself a trusted advisor to work with would be my, biggest suggestion here too, because somebody's going to take the time and not generalize their information. They're going to really tailor it to suit you, customize it, find out about you, your business, your customer, and really make sure it works for you. Because it's so many times I've seen people say, oh yeah, but I need to get $1 million. And I look at them, I go, why? What are you going to spend it on? What's your profit margin on that? You're a consultant. It's mostly profit what you're getting, so would 250, 300 do if that was mostly profit in your bank? What does that mean for you right now? And when you have those conversations, they suddenly change their mindset and go, well, I was doing it because Alex Hormozi told me I had to go and get $1 million, in sales or revenue coming through. And it goes back to what you said earlier, right? $1 million in revenue is not $1 million in your bank account where you can pull out and spend. You've got to make sure your profit's there. So you can have 500,000 with a higher profit margin than what you've got with $1 million. And it could be a whole lot less stress.
Well, and to kind of wrap it, I mean, obviously, James, for sure, we would rather do 750 at a 15% profit than 1.5 at 5. But I'd also rather do 1.5 while, kind of working towards 15 as well. You know what I mean? And I think ultimately it does, kind of roll into that planning, the forecasting, like all that kind of stuff, the strategy side, which I think a lot of people miss if you're spending too much time in your business because you're too focused on it. And so as we kind of wrap up, Mark, I love it. I know like we could go on for a lot of different focus points and strategies. And I think it was a first conversation. I think I'd love to have you back on and we can talk like actual sort of implementation side of things. Today was just kind of like a first kind of high level conversation. Yeah. I know it's going to be in the busy season, right? With taxes and all that fun stuff coming up for you. So good luck with that. But what's something, we like to wrap up the show every time with something that you hope somebody walks away from today, from the conversation, from our, kind of unscripted, back and forth. What's that one thing for you that you hope somebody walks away from today?
Yeah, that's a really good question to lean on. I mean, I think understanding it takes more than just you to be successful is really the unlock key that most owners learn over time, right? And I think this conversation alone shows you how there's so many different sides and opinions and viewpoints And when you're listening to them, and I completely agreed, you don't need to listen to all the noise. But if you find the right experts and the right leaders that are all willing to have a conversation, first off, you realize that not everybody agrees. James has countered some of the things that I've said, and I love it. Like, that's not something I'm frustrated about. That is what strategy is about. You get leaders in a room, and you have a conversation of where we are and what the numbers say, where we are of how our feelings are, where we are of how our philosophies are, and you chart a path forward. And the whole goal of strategy is building out a plan so that everybody can be disciplined and everybody can row the boat in the same direction. And if you're truly willing to bring the right people in the room with you, then you're truly going to flourish. And I always say this is like, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And if you want to get to the next room, you need to make sure that you're ready for it. So that means that you've prepared through understanding certain metrics, understanding certain philosophies, to understanding the people that you're going into that room with. Because you know what's going to end up happening, that's going to unlock so much more keys that you might not have had that other person does have. And I think that kind of runs hand in hand with where strategy and discipline kind of run around. Our whole goal is going, hey, we're coming up with this plan that allows everybody to be disciplined in every department, right? But it starts with, I need to get the right people in the room, and we need to disagree. And we need to have what's considered constructive conflict. And if we can have constructive conflict, the only thing that can come out of constructive conflict is the right path forward. And then some might not love that path, and some might think it's the greatest path since sliced bread. But we're all committed to that path forward. And if we can, and if you can find advisors, if you can find people, if you can find, even if it's your wife, to sit in the room with you and just be that devil's advocate, right? And really challenge, and you guys be willing to have that challenging conversation, then so many insights can come out, even if it's not the insights that you were hoping for. And I think that's the big thing. So that I'd want people that were listening to this you kind of had a little bit of an insight, especially at the end, of like, hey, people might not agree on this, or people might have different philosophies for it, but it's all geared towards making you more profitable, making sure that your top line and your bottom line are all in sync and moving forward for you, so that your business can move forward.
For sure. I love it. And so, Jordan, how about you? What's one thing that you kind of hope somebody walks away from today's conversation with?
Yeah, I like what you said there, Mark. I mean, so many people like surrounding themselves with yes men or yes women, just saying, yeah, that's a great idea. Pat you on the back. Thank you. See you later. Whether that's an advisor or staff, you're hiring. I always hire for a skill set that I don't have, or a skill set that someone does better than me. And one of the things I find is so many people, when they're doing things, if you're growing in their business, and myself included, and Dave, you too, or in the conversations we've had, if you're not feeling uncomfortable with some of the decisions you're making, you're probably too comfortable, and you probably are not growing anywhere near the pace you want to, or in the direction you want to go. You've got to feel a little bit uncomfortable. You've got to feel like the direction you're going in is the right. You got to know in your gut it's the right direction, but you got to know that it's going to take a bit of grit. It's going to take determination. It's going to take hard work. And like you said earlier, Mark, like banging your head against the wall until you get it right. And if you have the funds, you can hire someone to do it. But if you don't have the funds, be prepared to do the work, and be prepared to just fail at it a bunch of times before you finally get it right. So for me, I'd say, stop surrounding yourself with yes people. Make sure that you do the hard work, and try and surround yourself with people who are capable of giving you good information. And if you are going to do, if you're going to hire a bookkeeper and accountant anyway, why not hire someone who's got some willingness to give you some advice and take a minute to understand what you really do, not just crunch some numbers and, check in your software occasionally.
Well, and I think that's, and I've mentioned it here, if you're not getting any sort of, like, if your bookkeeper is literally just sending you a report and that's it at the end of the month, like, no matter how much you like them, it is time for you to probably find somebody else, right? Or if your accountant is only giving you a tax return and not talking to you except for, in February and saying, hey, it's tax time again, you got your stuff for me? Like, that is not the people that you want to support your business. Like, you need to search
and so that's one thing. And the second thing, I think,
or ask.
Well, that's the other thing.
Because we can put this all on us, but a lot of people go, "Hey, I just want tax preparation done." You go, "Sure, you don't want some advice? Hey, I think we should set up a call." And you're like, "Nope." And then you go, "My CPA doesn't give me anything." It's like you need to just be very clear on what you really want, because all of them are probably willing to give it to you. Especially if they have the 3 letters I got, they're willing to give it to you. They just don't think that you're going to pay for it. And that is where our industry is dinosaurs. I will fully own that. Right. We're just like death and taxes. That's all they want. Right.
People change their mind.
Yeah.
What people said 3 months ago may not be what they want to. They're going to say in 6 months or 12 months from now. So
for sure, that's why it's always important that you check in. Yep, that's why it's always important that you check in, no matter what. Every 3 or 4 months with your follow-up processes, but that's another episode we'll get in, later, in your follow-up and your process and all that stuff. But I think ultimately it comes down to, making sure that you understand your numbers, that you have that support team. As Mark said it, he kind of reiterates what I've said before. You do not have to be the smartest person in your room. Surround yourself with those people that are smart and can push you forward. That not just say, "Oh yeah, you're doing everything perfectly," and then they're just going to hold you where you need to be. Find those people, find that support group, and surround yourself with them, I think, is the important thing. So, Mark, I love it. I appreciate you kind of joining us today. Dwarren, thanks, brother. And for those of you that watch, if you made it this far, we love you. Thank you. If you have any questions about anything we talked about, drop a comment down below, or feel free to drop it just like, everybody's doing in the comments. Feel free to drop some things over there. And then here you go. Like, just to wrap it up, Jay, mine's together, even though maybe different. Love it, man. James, have a good one. Look forward to it, and we'll talk to you guys soon. And we love you, and do all that fun algorithmy stuff when you wrap it up. You don't do that like, subscribe stuff. So we'll see you in the next one.